There's a conversation that happens in the same place every year. Same cafe, same group, same voice. A little older, a little more worn. And the words are almost identical to the ones spoken 12 months ago. I've been thinking about going back to study. I want to start that project. I need to change some things. The specifics shift. The grammar stays in the future tense. You know this conversation. You may have had it. You may be the person having it right now. In your head. With yourself. In the quiet after midnight when the day has ended and nothing you said would happen has happened. There is a man in that conversation and a man outside of it. And the difference between them is not talent, not opportunity, not the particular shape of their life circumstances. It is a single internal distinction that almost nobody names clearly enough. Meet Matthias, 34 years old, creative director at a mid-size agency. Intelligent, genuinely intelligent, the kind of person that other people call wasted in the job he's in, which he's heard often enough that he's started to believe it's a compliment rather than an observation. Matthias talks about evolution the way some people talk about travel, vividly, specifically, with detailed knowledge of the destination and a consistent inability to book the flight. He knows the frameworks. He's read the books, the ones about growth mindset, neuroplasticity, identity change, habit stacking. He uses the vocabulary correctly. In conversation, he sounds like someone who has already arrived. But there's a gap, and the gap has a very specific shape. Matthias treats understanding as transformation.
He reads the idea, integrates it intellectually, feels the shift in his mind, and then, without quite realizing it, files it under done. The insight becomes a trophy instead of a tool. And his life, 3 years later, is assembled from exactly the same materials as 3 years ago, just narrated with better language.
Carol Dweck, in decades of research at Stanford, identified something that gets quoted often and understood rarely. She called it the growth mindset, the belief that your qualities are not fixed, that intelligence and character are things you can develop rather than things you simply have or don't have. She contrasted it with the fixed mindset, the quiet underlying belief that you are what you are, that your ceiling is set, that effort beyond a point is futile. Here's what the pop psychology version of her work omits. The fixed mindset doesn't announce itself. It doesn't say, I can't change. It says, I already know about change. It doesn't resist evolution. It performs it. It collects content about it. It identifies as a person who evolves. The fixed mindset, at its most sophisticated, is a man who has convinced himself that consuming the idea and living the idea are the same act. And because the consumption feels so real, because it produces genuine emotional responses, genuine moments of clarity, genuine conviction, the absence of actual behavior change goes unnoticed, or noticed and explained away. This is not stupidity. This is the most common failure mode of intelligent people. Let me be honest about something uncomfortable. The people who most need to hear what I'm about to say are also the people most likely to hear it and think, yes, exactly. This is the thing other people don't understand. There is a particular self-awareness trap that well-read, introspective men fall into. You know your patterns. You can name your tendencies with impressive precision. You can identify your avoidance behaviors, articulate your blind spots, explain your self-sabotage mechanisms with the kind of clinical clarity that sounds, from the outside, like mastery. But the explanation is not the exit. Knowing that you procrastinate under conditions of high stakes doesn't stop you from procrastinating under conditions of high stakes. Knowing that you retreat into research as a substitute for commitment doesn't break the retreat. The map of the trap is not the same as leaving the trap. And here's the part that stings. Self-knowledge without behavioral change isn't wisdom. It's the most refined form of staying exactly where you are while feeling like you're somewhere else. Matthias has incredible self-knowledge. He knows exactly why he's still at the same agency, why the project is still in the notebook, why the relationship conversation he needs to have hasn't happened. He can trace it all the way back to a specific dynamic in his adolescence, name the psychological pattern, cite the relevant research. And he hasn't moved. There's a distinction I want to make here between two types of people who talk about evolution. The first talks about it because it is fascinating. Ideas excite him. Self-discovery is inherently pleasurable. The conversation about becoming is richer, warmer, more interesting than the slow, unglamorous work of actually becoming. This man isn't dishonest. He genuinely believes he is on a path. The path, however, is made entirely of conversations about paths. The second talks about it because it's generating friction, because something in him won't stop, because the gap between who he is and who he is capable of being has become uncomfortable enough that silence about it is no longer possible. He doesn't talk about evolution because it feels good. He talks about it because something in him refuses to pretend anymore. The second man is dangerous in the best possible sense, not because he's more talented, because his discontent has become load-bearing. Schopenhauer wrote about what he called the will, the fundamental, inarticulate drive underneath consciousness, pushing through everything, indifferent to reason, indifferent to comfort. He didn't mean it as an inspiration. He meant it as a description of what human beings actually are, underneath the narrative they construct. I'm not invoking Schopenhauer to make you feel intellectually engaged. I'm invoking him because there is a moment, and you know if you've had it, when the will stops being background noise, when the gap stops being something you visit occasionally and starts being something you live inside, when the talking becomes genuinely unbearable, not because you judge yourself for talking, but because the distance between your words and your reality has grown too wide for any amount of self-compassion to bridge. That moment is not a crisis. That moment is the beginning. Before we go further, tudo que você está aprendendo aqui só funciona se você executar. E executar é exatamente onde a maioria para. Criei um sistema chamado Untamed Mind Protocol. 3 ferramentas que trabalham juntas. Um e-book que explica o porquê, um painel interativo que organiza o seu dia e um áudio de reprogramação que age onde o conhecimento não chega. Link na descrição. Agora voltando ao conteúdo. So what is the actual distinction? What is the thing that separates the man who talks from the man who moves? It is not discipline, not in the way the word is usually used, as a kind of personal virtue that some people have and others lack. It is not motivation. We've established where that road ends. It is not even belief, because you can believe completely in the importance of what you're not doing and still not do it. The distinction is this. The man who evolves has made behavior non-negotiable in a way that belief never has to be. This requires unpacking because it's subtle. When something is a belief, it lives in the domain of the optional. Beliefs can be revised. Beliefs have conditions. Beliefs exist in conversation with other beliefs. You can believe something fully and still, in a given moment, choose differently. And the belief will accommodate that with a reasonable explanation. When something is non-negotiable, it doesn't live in that domain at all. It doesn't require motivation to sustain. It doesn't require belief to execute. It doesn't negotiate with the mood of the morning or the resistance of the afternoon. It functions the way your heartbeat functions, not because you decided to keep it going, but because it has been placed outside the category of decision. The man who has truly crossed the line from talking to evolving has done something that looks small from the outside and is enormous from the inside. He has moved at least one thing, one behavior, one practice, one commitment, from the category of what I believe I should do to the category of what I do. Not what I'm working toward, not what I'm trying to do, what I do. And from that one non-negotiable, the identity starts to shift. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the narrative about who he is begins to be authored by his actions rather than his intentions. This is where Matthias stood at the edge of something. He didn't have a revelation. There was no morning where the fog lifted and certainty arrived. What happened was quieter and, in retrospect, more significant. He got tired of his own explanations. Not tired of himself, tired of the specific act of explaining to himself in sophisticated language why today was not the right day. He'd heard the explanation so many times that it had lost its texture. It sounded like a recording, and recordings, once you recognize them, can't be unrecognized. So he made one decision that didn't feel significant in the moment. He stopped treating his side project as something that required ideal conditions to enter. He gave it 30 minutes. Every day. Not most days. Every day. Not when possible. Every day. Without evaluating whether the 30 minutes were good. Without requiring that something meaningful happen in them. The session happened. That was the only criterion. The first week produced almost nothing. The second week produced slightly more. By the fourth week, something had shifted that he could feel but not fully articulate. A growing sense that this was something he did, not something he was trying to do. The project is not finished. It may not be finished for years, but Mateus is no longer in the conversation he was having before. Not because he figured something out, because he moved one thing out of the category of belief and into the category of behavior. The rest followed, the way rest always follows, when the first thing is genuinely done. Let me talk about what makes this so hard, because if I don't, I'm just describing the destination and pretending the terrain between here and there doesn't exist. The talking feels like doing because it activates similar neural pathways. This is not a metaphor. When you vividly imagine taking an action, your brain produces many of the same signals it would produce if you were actually taking it. Visualization, planning, detailed articulation of your goals, even consuming content about the thing you want to do. All of these produce a mild version of the neurological reward that actual execution would produce. This is why the man who talks about evolving is not simply lying to himself. He's receiving a genuine, if partial, signal from his nervous system that says, "You're engaging with this." And that signal, repeated often enough, can be mistaken for progress. Can, in fact, temporarily satisfy the drive that would otherwise push him toward actual behavior change. The conversation about becoming is, in a very real physiological sense, a substitute for becoming. A less costly, more immediately comfortable, endlessly renewable substitute. Breaking this pattern requires something that can feel almost violent in its directness. Action that is not preceded by preparation, not qualified by readiness, not cushioned by the familiar narration of why you understand what you're about to do. Just the action, bare, unannounced, before the internal committee has a chance to convene. This is why so much transformation happens in moments that don't feel like transformation. Not in the planned, ceremonially launched beginning, but in the random Tuesday afternoon when you do the thing without announcing it, without making it mean anything yet, without requiring it to be the start of something. I want to distinguish between two kinds of self-awareness, because not all self-knowledge is created equal, and this distinction matters more than almost anything else I'll say. The first kind of self-awareness is retrospective. You know why you are the way you are. You've done the tracing, the childhood patterns, the formative dynamics, the psychological structures that explain your current behavior. This is useful. It builds compassion. It reduces shame. But on its own, it produces nothing. Because the past is the one thing you cannot act on. You can understand it completely and be unchanged by it. The second kind of self-awareness is perspective. You know, in real time, which behaviors are moving you toward the person you want to be and which are moving you away. Not why you're doing what you're doing, but what is the consequence of this choice right now? Not what shaped me, but what am I shaping? The man who evolves has shifted his center of gravity from the first kind to the second. He's less interested in explaining his patterns than in interrupting them, in the moment before they complete. This is harder than it sounds. The retrospective explanation arrives with such momentum, such weight of familiarity, that it often crowds out the prospective question entirely. You understand the reason before you've asked whether the reason should win. Learning to hold both, to know why and still ask what, is, I think, one of the most underrated skills in a life of genuine development. There is a specific moment that I want to name, because I think recognizing it can change the arc of a year. There is a point in every man's life, repeated, revisited, sometimes weekly, where he is standing at the exact intersection between talking and doing, where the thing he says he wants to do is immediately available, where there is no real obstacle, no genuine preparation required, nothing standing between him and the first action except the habitual hesitation that he has, over time, learned to dress in the language of strategy. In that moment, the question that matters is not, am I ready? It is not, is this the right approach? It is not even, do I want this? The question is, what am I actually choosing right now? Not what are you planning to choose? Not what do you intend to choose eventually? What are you choosing in this specific moment, with this specific action available to you, in this ordinary afternoon that will never return? Most men, in that moment, choose the conversation. They reach for the phone, for the browser, for the plan they've already written twice. They stay in the domain of the symbolic, where everything is clean and possible and uncontested by reality. The man who evolves chooses the action, not because he's more committed in some abstract sense, but because he has practiced it enough times that the hesitation no longer wins automatically. He's interrupted the pattern often enough that the interruption has become, slowly, a new pattern. I'll say this plainly without softening it. Every day that you talk about evolving without doing something that constitutes evolution, you are not standing still. You are moving backwards, not dramatically, incrementally. In the accumulation of small choices that say, vote by vote, I am the kind of person whose intentions outrun my actions. In the growing distance between the self you narrate and the self you inhabit. In the quiet erosion of self-trust that happens when your word, even to yourself, has a consistent exemption clause. This is not a judgment. I am not standing outside this looking in. I know this place intimately. I know how easy it is to mistake richness of inner life for richness of life. I know how a man can spend years in a state of imminent transformation, always on the edge, always almost there, always with something genuinely important about to begin. The edge is not the destination. The edge is the warning. So what does the shift actually look like? It doesn't look like a breakthrough. It doesn't look like finally figuring it out. It doesn't come with the emotional signature you've been waiting for. It looks like Mateus opening a file on a Tuesday with no particular feeling about it. It looks like doing the thing before you've decided whether you feel like doing the thing. It looks like a 30-minute commitment kept for a week, then another week, then long enough that it stops being a commitment and starts being something that happens, the way breathing happens, the way eating happens, without the daily question of whether today is the day. It looks like choosing, in the specific moment of hesitation, the behavior over the narration. Not once dramatically, many times quietly, without applause, without the confirmation that it's working yet. And at some point, you won't be able to name exactly when, the man looking back from the other side of that practice is not the same man who started. Not because he was transformed, because he built himself differently, one non-negotiated action at a time. The community inside Untamed Mind is made of those men, not the ones who figured it out first, the ones who got tired of the conversation and decided to make their life the argument. Você chegou até aqui. Isso já diz muita coisa sobre você. A maioria das pessoas abre um vídeo sobre disciplina e fecha na metade. Você ficou. Você ouviu. Você está procurando algo real. Então eu quero te mostrar algo que criei especificamente para quem está nesse ponto, que sabe o que quer, mas ainda sente que o dia termina sem que as coisas mais importantes tenham sido feitas. É o Untamed Mind Protocol. 3 ferramentas em um sistema só. O e-book te explica por que sua mente sabota antes mesmo de você perceber e o que fazer de diferente. O painel de performance abre direto no seu navegador, sem app, sem login. Você define sua intenção, suas 3 prioridades, usa o timer de foco, marca os hábitos, faz a reflexão noturna. Tudo em um lugar, funcionando offline. O áudio de reprogramação tem 20 minutos. Ouça de manhã ou antes de dormir. Age no subconsciente, onde os hábitos reais vivem. Link na descrição. Se você assistiu até aqui, esse protocolo é para você.